Hey everyone, welcome to this episode. We are going to be talking about a very important topic, white male privilege.
This is something that I've been able to take advantage of even without realizing it for most of my own financial independence journey. It's an important topic that we dive deep into, and we're excited that you're here.
So Grant, we're gonna dive deep into a topic I think that's gonna be important for us to just set the tone for this collaboration and just for the content that we're gonna talk about with financial freedom and independence. And so one of the things that I think turns off a lot of people who are not familiar with this movement or just this idea and concept is that you're gonna reach financial freedom, meaning you're gonna pay off your debt, you're gonna have this certain amount of money where you can quote unquote retire and reach independence, which for some people, that doesn't seem attainable, depending on their starting point, right? Because there are differences. There's a wealth gap in this country. There are systematic things that have stopped and prohibited people of color and from certain demographics to get ahead. And so for the movement to the public, it seems like this is more of a movement for people of privilege and white men, right? Sure. Let's just put that out there, because that's what people can just assume when they see this.
Right.
And some of that can be true. Mm-hmm. Some of that is true when it comes to this wealth gap. Right. So I want to really talk about this with you.
Sure.
Because one, I think we should acknowledge our privilege, right? There's a privilege that you have. There's even a privilege that I have,
Absolutely.
Right? So let's talk more about that, this white male privilege and then privilege in general and how that factors into this whole journey.
Yeah, I think it's a really important conversation that's not being had, quite frankly. It's something that I myself, being a white American male who speaks English without an accent, didn't realize was such a huge advantage until I got through my financial independence journey. Not that I didn't realize that as a man, it was easier for me to sell to men in some certain context, that being a white person, I was able to maybe more easily sell to rich white dudes. And I made a lot of my money, honestly, on selling things to rich white people, and probably because I looked like them and there was a comfort
you were able
that
to get
made
into
it
the
easier.
Room, right?
Yeah, I was able to get into the room. It made it easier. It was something that I wasn't even aware of until I got through the entire process. It's unfortunate that I wasn't more aware of it, I think, during the process, but I'm grateful that more of these conversations are starting to happen. I also, interestingly, while it's very different, and I can understand how it's very different, discrimination as a kind of larger topic, I've always struggled with my weight issues my entire life. Being called out about it, I feel like I've lost business deals in some cases because of it. I also am a pretty eccentric guy in some cases. So growing up, I experienced what ended up being a lot of really misdirected homophobia in my life. And while those are very different than racial discrimination and have a very different history, I feel like being called out in some of those ways or being labeled in a certain way made me a bit more empathetic to differences of all types. Even though I grew up and came from a world that was quite discriminatory, I would say, I feel blessed that I've never seen that huge difference. I've always seen people as one. But
can I stop you there? So sometimes
totally.
That's the annoying part.
Yeah.
Is that when people say, and that's the thing, we ultimately don't want to see color and difference, right? And so when someone says, well, there is no color, I don't see color,
but there totally is, yeah.
Right, so it's great that you have that perspective, but for many people, that's not the fact is that a lot of people are judging you on that.
Right.
And so again, I'm it's good that for you, you're looking at people in that sense.
Right.
And as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, but as a Black woman, like,
Yeah.
definitely I know that you feel that way, but it does matter.
It totally matters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the thing is, I had to realize that my view of the world wasn't the way the world works. You know what I mean? Like that my limited view of how I saw the world was just kind of not enough. Like that was not sufficient in the sense that just because I see something a certain way doesn't mean that as a system there's not a whole entire world that's set up to benefit me as a white male. I mean, literally the patriarchy, the country was founded by white men. It perpetuates itself to this day in so many different forms, and that I've been able to consciously as well as unconsciously benefit from a system set up to help me win.
Right. I think that's a good start. I
Yeah.
think the fact that you acknowledge it and you
Yeah.
don't get defensive about it is a good start.
Yeah,
Because
totally.
what I find that happens sometimes is that people, when you bring up privilege, like
Oh,
get
yeah.
very like, well, you're taking away from the hard work that I had to do. Like there's
Oh,
no
no.
doubt that usually most, unless you were just handed money,
Right.
or handed a trust fund and you didn't have to do anything but like sleep all day,
Right.
that you had to work for,
Right.
even if you were born into money, you had to work for something, some
Right.
part of it. So it's like, I always say this, I had this like great quote that I heard, that privilege is not what you had to go through, it's what you
Right.
didn't have to go through. So
Totally.
no one's like taking away, like when we bring up privilege,
Oh,
that
yeah.
the work that you did to get to where you are, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it's more of that, but let's be frank about what you didn't have to go through. So the things that you never noticed, like maybe walking into the room, like I always notice,
Yeah.
you know, that I'm usually, or
Right.
sometimes the only like
Right.
person of color
Totally.
in a room,
Yeah.
right? Whereas I know the other people at that table are not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like they're just like regular day for me, and I'm like, for me that's like kind of typical. So
Yeah.
learning kind of like how to move like around and like talk in a way in which code switch kind of
Yeah.
to get into the rooms, to make the deals, to
Right.
get ahead has been a skill that a lot
Yeah.
of people who are not in our position don't understand like how to do, or that
Totally.
it needs to be done.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, one of the toughest things in life is to try to put yourself in someone else's shoes when your experience is so different than theirs. And it might be impossible. And I think the only way to do it is by being open, by listening, by connecting, by realizing that the system is clearly set up to perpetuate the wealth gap and help the rich get richer. Certainly, there are benefits and advantages to a certain type of person, depending upon how you grew up and what you look like. The actual means, like compounding, doesn't discriminate, you know? And that's one of the things I think that really excites me is if you can get past that level of kind of living paycheck to paycheck and start saving no matter how you look, that in and of itself is an amount of sort of personal power that then allows you to live life on your own terms, even within a system that's set up to benefit certain people over other people.
And I'd just jump in and I'd say that, like, I agree with that. So my biggest thing is to acknowledge that it's a thing, because it is, and then to talk about like how then, like how can we give the people like tools to the people who need this to get ahead, right? So it's one thing if you know to we acknowledge it, but then you still think, well, I can't then reach my goals because, you know, of where I was born, who I was born to, and these things, where I completely acknowledge that for many people, they won't be able to. Not just because, you know, that they don't have opportunities. It's like they don't even know how to take advantage of the opportunities. I mean, some people don't really even have opportunities. So my thing is, how do we give people the tools to understand that even if they are born, you know, without this privilege that they seek or that are around them, how can they get ahead? And I think the tools that we're talking about here is, you know, the basics, right, of finances. So before we reach financial independence, how can we talk to people about how to manage their money, how to make more money, right? How to become more marketable in like the workforce so that they can get better jobs and to get out of debt, right? So these are like the baseline things that I think a lot of people need to like learn first. Before maybe like the big picture idea of financial independence and financial freedom. And then like helping people figure out and understand like taking back control. So that's my biggest thing. I was able to, you know, do a lot despite my upbringing. You know, I didn't have a horrible upbringing, so I want to make that clear. But being born to like a single mom who came here from another country, she Like, I mean, she started with nothing. She was able to put me in a position to have more, and that helped me. But it just, for me, proves the fact that it can be attainable for everyone, but you have to believe it to be true, and then you have to work at it. You have to work towards it.
Yeah, and you have to show examples of people who've done it, who have been in your situation, or who look similar to you, or who, I mean, the idea is a vast majority of the success stories that are shared in this world are of white tech guys, or, you know, even in the FIRE community, of a certain type of persona.
And they're high income. I think that's the big thing too. Not all, right? But even in my situation, like, it was like also income driving how much we were able to save. So if you're a person who is making minimum wage and you're looking like that, well, I can't even like pay my rent this week. You're looking at it as like, oh, see, it's for rich people, or it's for people who make a lot of money. So that's another thing.
Yeah, and that's why I think the conversation around how much money do you need to retire, or, you know, how do you make millions of dollars, isn't the important conversation. And one of the things that was really stark to me is that some of the kind of fastest paths to six figures are really only available to people who have access to that knowledge. And that knowledge is a privilege, you know. I was talking, with some people the other day, just like running Google AdWords campaigns. You know, that's something that is a clear path to making six figures. But when I talk to people, most people have never even heard of it. You know, it's something that just hasn't been available to them because there's this traditional narrative. Do you feel like just the ability to make money on your own terms, is it making it more accessible to people of color and women? And I mean, are we moving in the right direction, I guess is the question.
I think in general, we're moving in the right direction. I think this concept and thought process around like entrepreneurship is important. You know, I don't think it's for everyone, entrepreneurship.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's definitely, as you know, like as I know, because I'm doing it full time now too, it's like not easy, but I do think that skill set, like the entrepreneurial skill set, like whether you are in a 9-to-5, is important. So you can have that motivation, that self-starting attitude, that confidence. Like you can bring those skill sets that would allow you to, do well in your own business into a job. I think like that resilient attitude and being scrappy and just like working hard is something that like translates like throughout any type of whether you're an entrepreneur or you're working for someone else. I think the biggest thing, so like going back to what you're saying, is like representation. Like that's super important. So knowledge, like those are steps that people like need to take, right? Like you can't force someone to learn, and you can't like force someone to like be a self-starter and to like do things on their own. But what you can do, hopefully, like, and what I believe is really important, is that you do see more people, different types of people on the journey and on the path talking about these things. Because one of the things I get a lot is, I'm so happy someone who looks like me or sounds like me is talking about this, because I didn't even know this was possible. And so maybe their path is going to look totally different than mine, right? No one has the same path, but it allows people to see that this is something I can do. And, it allows them to see and chart their own like journey and to start at least.
So what could I do, or other white dudes do, to be on the right side as opposed to the wrong side, I think?
I think listening is key. So listening and not getting offended like by like the feedback, So when someone says I experience like discrimination, racism, or I don't feel like I have the tools to succeed, not just like writing it off saying, well, hard work, just do hard work and you'll get there. I think listening and being empathetic is like the first step. And then also like when you are in a position where you can help others, so whether you have a platform, like your platform, and you can like raise up voices that are not heard and like, introduce your audience like to people that might not have known about, is like super important. But it's continuing to have conversations like this, I think, is like ideal. And then, bringing it out to the world and to more people.
Now I realize, especially in the money world, there's kind of a bottom up and a top down strategy where you have to empower and inspire and give people the tools while also changing a system that makes it more available to others.
As you're talking, like I'm reminded of like Martin Luther King. He had this like quote. He said this thing. He said, "It's cruel to tell a man to like pull himself up by his bootstraps when he has no boots."
Right.
So I think this like concept of people like, you know, saying, "Oh, you know, just work hard," and like I get it because I'm a hard, you know, I believe in that. But from someone who doesn't feel like they have the boots to even start, it's kind of like, get out of here. Like, I don't want to hear that.
Right.
So how do we encourage and help people like that who don't feel like they have a start to do more?
Yeah, and we live in a world that like just sells the skill or the tactic, or they're like, here's what you need to do. When in reality, to a vast majority of people, kind of what you maybe need to do is pretty clear. What's not clear is, like you mentioned, like if they don't have boots, how do you even pull up your
They don't have the
bootstraps?
confidence. They don't even have the idea
momentum,
that that's like it's something.
that it's possible, the inspiration, the support.